My dear Mandy, I'm so sorry I upset you at our midnight tea. I think the reason was that after sweating at the book for about 8 hours, I was as tired as you were and edgy and sore-headed. But I didn't want to get at you. Please accept my apology, and also, what I want to mention and didn't because of feeling to have ground to a halt, my thanks for all the work in the garden today, and for helping Tris to get the mower operating. I hope you feel revived and refilled with energy tomorrow. Your always loving, but too often rude and irritable, Daddy.
This was the first of many letters my father wrote to me, or at least the first I kept. I was 11 years old, and I noted in my diary, "Daddy wrote to say sorry about yesterday. Well, I accepted, but I wish he would really say sorry to me sometimes." I think the real reason for that letter was an expedition to see some nightjars. It was late, and I and my brothers, Tristan and Fabian, had got too comfortable in the bracken and had fallen asleep. I wrote about it in my diary. Daddy was furious. Well, it was so late. Went for a nice walk before that and found some owl pellets and some bird skulls. It was too long and too muddy, but nice, and Daddy was in a good mood, so it was a pity about the nightjars. There were innumerable other letters, earlier or later, that I lost over the years, or even threw away, out of anger or carelessness. I'm glad I kept the ones I did keep, though I wasn't always so pleased to receive them, and I realise now that I'm lucky to have tangible proof of his love. If we had both swallowed our pride occasionally, we might have avoided the frequent confrontations, the countless times I left home, or he threw me out. We both found it easy to express anger, and so difficult to apologise. The times we were completely at ease in each other's company were rare. However, as we grew older, we children realised that life was more interesting when he was around, and when he was away on one of his frequent trips as a reporter for Picture Post, and then for his television work, or for research on a book, he always sent us postcards.
Pisa, 26th of June, 1961. Darling Poodle, the Leaning Tower really does lean. It looks like the sugary decoration on a wedding cake, knocked askew. Rome. Darling Poodle, after 10 days here, we're now leaving for Naples, Pompeii, etc. Miss you a lot and longing to see you. I'm eating so much spaghetti and other pasta, I'm getting fat. Lucky you're not faced with the temptation.
My father's frequent absences were not the cause of our difficulties in knowing him as a parent. He couldn't relate to children, and although we knew he loved us, was always uncomfortable with us, especially when we were small. The loss of his leg, too, was a barrier to his relationship with us, in that he was physically unable to romp with us or to kick a ball about. He had had an accident in the RAF. While hurdling, during PE exercises, he fell and damaged his knee. Complications arose which resulted in the loss of his leg, and for the rest of his life he suffered severe shooting pains in his missing limb.
Darling Scruffs, now in Amsterdam, a lovely city. This morning we went by launch around the canals. It's as beautiful as Venice in many parts. Went to a Latin American nightclub last night, which you'd have enjoyed. Tomorrow we're going to see Anne Frank's house. Do hope your exam went well, Mandy.
From 1959, the year my father started regular work on television, until 1967, we lived in a large Elizabethan farmhouse, Gurney's, on the Hertfordshire-Bedfordshire border, which we shared with a variety of pets. I attended a private progressive co-ed school near our home. The year before my O-levels, I wrote to my father. What I really wanted to ask you and Ma is if I could board at school next term, because all the social life happens in the evenings and Sunday discos, and I miss out on it, really, being a day bug and too far away. Anyway, I know it'll be expensive, so I thought if I mentioned it in advance, you could think about it and talk about it with Ma and let me know when I see you. See you soon. Lots of love, M. But his next letter made no reference to my request.
Gurney's, 9th of April, 1964. My dear Mandy, I think it might be better if I write to you rather than talk to you about your report. It is not an altogether bad report, but it's not good enough, and not as good as I had hoped it would be in the light of the talk we had together at the end of the previous term, when you assured me that from then on you would be making an all-out effort. Now, I am writing because I love you so much and also know you so well, and therefore, for your sake, want to try to emphasize certain points. I recognize that you and I are very much alike in temperament, and patience and self-discipline aren't our strongest characteristics, so I do, from within myself, know something of your difficulties. As a TV commercial might phrase it, there's no substitute for work. What I mean is that there are no shortcuts. You have to work for what is worth having, but also, and this is much more important, it's in work that the greatest satisfactions lie, the satisfaction of stretching yourself, using your abilities and making them expand, and knowing that you have accomplished something that could have been done only by you, using your unique apparatus. This really is at the center of life, and those who never orientate themselves in this direction are missing more than they ever know. It really is for your sake that I'm saying all this. As you know, I hate waste, and I especially hate to see a human being wasting ability and opportunities, because in a way this is a failure of one's duty as a human being, which is to enrich and strengthen ourselves and so the whole human race that we are bound up in, like it or not. In the end, this is where you will find the greatest pleasures and deeper satisfactions are. Not from being browbeaten and nagged into working, but from doing it voluntarily and with an enthusiasm that will grow as you increase your capacity and knowledge. But you have to start off by disciplining yourself into a single-mindedness and wholeheartedness that is still very much absent. All my love, darling daughter, Pa.
Diary, 10th of April. Got a very stern letter from Dad about my report. He's awfully cross and depressed about the school fees. I think he thinks he's wasting his money. It's not very tactful of the school to send the report with the bill. Anyway, Dad's gone back to London and I didn't mention boarding at school. He wants to know what I think about the report, not boarding. Oh dear. Well, what I think is, I've still got a year before O-levels, which is plenty of time, and as long as I can get away with biology instead of maths, I'll be okay, because English is fine, and history and French. I'm a bit worried about German. I'm supposed to be good at languages, but you wouldn't think so, looking at my German marks. The following spring, my parents sent me to Heidelberg, under a paying guest tutorial scheme, much against my will.
Gurneys, 14th of April, 1965. Dearest Mansell, we were very pleased to have your letter and to know that you had arrived safely and are enjoying it there. So glad, too, that you successfully made contact with Eleanor M. How nice of her to take you to the opera. Cliff Mitchellmore is away today, and Magnus Magnusson has gone off to Norway filming, so I'm in the studio every day, which is rather distasteful after all those free days at home. We saw the Malberts at Codicote on Saturday night. Tristan went up to Cambridge yesterday to have lunch with the family of his new girlfriend, number 147. Sarah, I think it is. He bashed his car in on the way back. The lamps are now fixed up on our terrace on the Grapevine lamppost. I hope they look all right, but secretly suspect that it now looks like a filling station at the back there. Pyewacket misses you terribly. All he does is stalk on his gawky legs all over the house, yowling and grumbling, and repeatedly goes up your stairs to see if you've sneaked back. All the other animals and humans are in good form, I think. I do hope that by now your cold has gone, darling. I shall look forward to seeing you soon, but in the meantime have fun and do some work on your German. Love and kisses, your adoring Pa.
Heidelberg, 20th of April. Here's another letter. I haven't been doing anything. Actually, I have, but I'm still mad at you for sending me here. I told you that I didn't want to come, didn't I? All the English girls I meet are having such fun and going to so many places. I'm so jealous. I haven't done anything with Frau H. She was horrified that a 15-year-old English girl staying near here had a steady boyfriend, so I told her I had 2. She says strange men are not nice, so her son has got to chaperone me. I don't like her son, and I'm sure he's queer. I wish you would come and see me, like you thought of doing once, because it will probably be the last time you see me alive. I will either die of boredom, drown in tears, or commit suicide. Please, please, write or come or something. Love, M.
All right, my dear, we've taken your point. You don't like it there and wish you had never gone. Do you think you could now stop complaining about it and make up your mind to extract a little value out of the experience? We have heard nothing from you about what the city is like, about where you have been, about your impressions of Germany and German living. May I just try to get across to you that although I'm sorry it didn't prove to be a jollier billet and that you have found the surroundings irksome, I spent the money I have spent on sending you there because I wanted you to have an additional chance in your examinations. It wasn't just a holiday, so please try to adjust yourself to the situation and use it to benefit. I assure you it isn't either becoming or amusing to get this stream of abuse for having organized this. Frau H. seems to be taking her duties seriously in making sure you come back with more German than you left with. All love, your ever affectionate Pa.
That summer, both my parents set out across the United States to do research for my father's book on migrant workers, Hard Travelling. He sent postcards from places whose names were familiar to us from songs.
Nashville, Tennessee. Dearest all, we came through the Cumberland Gap and have spent the day here, the capital of country and western music, which shares the airwaves with sermons and religious pop. This is deep in the Bible Belt. Went to the RCA recording studio and were face to face with Roy Orbison in Matador's rig and cross eyes behind dark glasses. Tulsa, Oklahoma. I can see why the girl in the song stopped 24 hours from here. Now done over 2,000 miles. Do hope you're happily over the hump of the exams. All love from your hobo parents. Davis, California, 24th of July. I am now 500 miles north of San Francisco, and having finished my business here, move on tomorrow up into Oregon to look at some lumber camps, and then I shall begin the rather daunting-looking return journey through the northern states. The Ford has up to now run in a very stalwart fashion. No breakdowns at all touch piles of wood. The only possible near trouble was when I was doing a steady 80 miles per hour along the freeway, and suddenly there, drawing up in front of me, was a highway patrol car with its lights flashing. The cop, however, proved very fascinated by my international driving license and asked what I was doing in the States, and then entered into a long chat about the subject of the book, and finally said he decided to let me off with a warning instead of booking me for a $60 fine, and said he'd very much like to have a copy of the book when it comes out. The Beatles are due in Los Angeles late in August, and Herman's Hermits just before them. Both are getting heavily plugged on the radio. But really there isn't much interest in pop music here. Records are played all the time, but just as fillers between the commercials, and there isn't the kind of keen attention paid to the top 10, etc., that there is in Britain. One record that's being played a lot here is by Bob Dylan, Like a Rolling Stone. I do like it enormously. Do take care of yourselves. With fondest love, Pa. Ypsilanti, Michigan, 5th of August. Dearest Mandy and Triss, have just got into Ann Arbor. Chicago worked out quite well, made contact with old Wobblies and got good stuff from them, also some mission stuff. Finally, by wiring him, got in touch with Nelson Algren and spent the evening in one of his sleazy haunts. Enjoyable. I do hope that things are organised at Gurney's and that by now Mummy's home and settled. Take care of her and yourselves. All love, Pa.
In August 1965, I spent my first holiday away from my parents with 3 friends in a caravan in Dorset, there to await the results of my exams. My father was by now on the last lap of his journey.
I think of you often and miss you all a great deal. It seems still a very long time before I shall see you all again, but we'll have a grand reunion when we're all once again foregathered at Gurney's. I get a tremendous amount of interest out of travelling, especially out of America, but it never fails to strengthen my gladness that I live in England and that I have Gurneys and my children to return to. Do take care of yourselves. With fondest love, Pa.
At the end of August 1965, my father returned from his trip to the States, and I heard that I had passed my exams, including German. I was staying with friends in a caravan on the Dorset coast. Postcard. Dear Ma and Pa, we got here okay. The caravan's great and right by the sea. It's too cold to swim, but we walk a lot. We met some boys in West Bay, and they're going to take us for a drive. Hope you're well. Loads of love, me.
Gurneys, 2nd of September. Dear darling me, thank you for your nice letter and card, and we were happy to hear that the caravan is Hilton-like and that you're having fun. Much as ever here. I've just, 4:30 p.m, got back from the second day's filming at Henlow RAF camp, which is to be for the BBC's Battle of Britain anniversary programme. They'd managed to gather together from all over Britain a rather marvellous collection of old crates, going right back to a 1912 Blackburn. I had to interview 4 pilots, including Flight Lieutenant Ginger Lacey, who, was a young sergeant pilot, was the top scorer of the Battle of Britain, with 18 German planes on his record. Just found in the garage a white wing. So, obviously, that goddamn sinister, satanic killer cat Pisey has assassinated yet another pigeon, and an all-white one at that. Curse his insatiable bloody fangs. I've been working hard at the book. It's terribly spectrally quiet in the house without you all. Really quite morbid. I hate it without you around, without the sounds of 2 transistors, each individually on Radio Caroline and Radio London, and the record player simultaneously grinding through a pack of 45s while you conscientiously work away at your school books, ignoring Sherlock's moaning, Tilly's yapping, the telephone ringing, the peafowl crowing, Mr. Peters roaring up and down with the motor mower, Mummy's sacred new washing machine munching noisily with its metal jaws at yet another sacrifice of my best cashmere sweater, and Mummy on her knees and touching the tiles with her forehead, singing incantations to its divine goodness and omnipotence. All the usual country peace and stillness. Take care of yourself, dearest Pooh, and longing to see you soon, your loving Pa.
Mind you, his study wasn't much affected by the bedlam. It was in a barn at the end of the garden.
St. John's Wood, 27th of September. My dearest daughter, Mummy has shown me the list of books you need for A-level. That's quite a formidable battery, but it seemed to me not by any means dreary and dusty. I've been going through my shelves and found some you need, and also others that I think you'll find relevant and useful in their own right. Orwell's essays I'm certain you'll relish just to read, apart from the necessity of having to study them. Orwell had, in my view, one of the best critical minds of this age, a keen shaft of light cutting through every subject he looked at. The viewpoint, of course, of a socialist, but a totally independent, non-party socialist. He also wrote with such bony, no-nonsense clarity. Gurneys, 5th of December. My dearest Mandel, the news may have filtered through to you that I've been at home this past couple of days with vague gastric flu or some similar blight. I drove to Cambridge and back on Sunday to give the talk to the young men of St. Catherine's College, and it was a very nasty drive indeed. No fog, but a glassy coating of ice on the roads. It was quite an enjoyable evening, really, although I don't basically enjoy addressing audiences. After the sherry in the room of one of the undergraduates, I was entertained to dinner at high table with all the dons in hall, and then did my stuff. There seemed to be quite a lively interest among them in journalism and television. I had the very shocking news over the telephone from Liz Cowley at Tonight that Xanthi Wakefield had killed herself. As you may remember, I worked with Xanthi on quite a lot of stories. She was a producer there. A brilliantly clever and nice girl with a double first at Oxford, daughter of a Tory MP. She had for a year or two been having rather an unhappy love affair, and a little time back had a nervous breakdown, and now, apparently, she last night took an overdose of sleeping pills. It seems such a terrible waste of life and talent. St. John's Wood, 10th of December. Darling Poodle. One thing I have been meaning to say, but will now, is how pleased and happy I am at the way you've been working and applying yourself in the past months. I know I'm a fearful nagger, and far too often remark upon minor things that momentarily irritate me than upon the things that make me so proud of you. I think actually that the main reason why on occasions we've flown at each other and verbally battered each other is because of your spirit and determination, and what is important is to keep those things, and it doesn't matter a jot that they clash with my unreasonableness at times. They are part of the reason I love you so much, apart from the fact that you've got alarmingly pretty in the past short time, and this is vital in being a person in your own right. To declare yourself with certainty and to stand up against disagreement and argument for what you believe to be true. Isn't it sad about the peahen dying? Or rather sad about the peacock now alone in that big barn? I don't really know what to do about it. We must have an inquest. I must return to Lime Grove, where all my waking hours seem to be spent, but will be seeing you in a couple of days. Friday's off, I hope. Your loving Pa.
The following Easter, I returned to Heidelberg to stay with a German girl I had met on my previous visit, and once more to attempt to improve my German grammar. My younger brother, on the brink of his O-levels, was sent to a family in France to improve his French.
BBC, 6th of April, 1966. Dear Mandel, how are you? It was nice to hear you on the telephone. We've had a bit of a crisis over Fabian and his stay in France. We got a phone call to say that this 2-bit count, who was to be his host, objected to his hair and wanted him removed. I got onto the agency and they managed to find Fabian an alternative family. I feel in such a boiling rage at this mean-minded, despicable little bourgeois crumb that I'd like to see him face to face, for it was a beastly thing to do to a young boy, and Fabian can't have felt anything but terribly unhappy and upset. The French really are the most unlovable people in the world, I think, with all the worst kind of meanness and conventional hardness of any. No other news of especial interest. I shall be going down to Gurney's tomorrow evening. It looks a rather grey and wet prospect for Easter, but if the weather clears, I think I may have a day out with George Evans, botanising and ornithologising over at Flitwick Moor, that interesting country round Ampthill. Do write, love, and take care of yourself. Your loving Papa.
In 1967 we moved house, and the same year I left school after getting the necessary A-levels, and with a place at university for 1968. Not much correspondence took place at this time, as my father was at home a great deal more. In 1968 he began to have kidney trouble, and was found to have a tubercular kidney. He was desperately depressed. He found physical imperfection intolerable, and the thought of his body giving out on him angered and frustrated him. The day after he was told that he would have to go into hospital with the possibility of a kidney removal, my younger brother was involved in a very bad car crash. I came back from Italy, where I had gone as an au pair. My father was not operated on, but was put on a course of curative drugs. He was ill for the whole summer, and in a state of intense, withdrawn depression. However, he visited me at university in October.
Fleece House, 15th of October, 1968. It was lovely seeing you last weekend and finding you so well settled in. Both Mother and I were very impressed by the university itself and happy to see that you're so comfortably installed in your room. We both hope it will be the setting for you for 3 satisfying and productive years. We were a bit troubled by your telephone call this evening and your own anxieties about your work, chiefly because it's very difficult at this distance to make useful suggestions and to give you a little comfort. We really do understand the disadvantage you're at in having done so little history. I think your best way of tackling this problem is on two levels. A, make contact with other students who are doing the same course and get some help and guidance and tips from them. And B, ensure that your advisor does his job and advises you. Put your problem before him firmly and emphatically and coolly, and make sure that he appreciates your particular difficulties. Now, don't take what follows as being preachy, but understand that I'm only saying it because I want to get you to save yourself unnecessary worries and depression. The way life works in its everyday mechanics is that people are likely to place upon you the value you place upon yourself. So it's up to you, without being overly aggressive, to make clear what qualities and capabilities you have. I really do realize and sympathize with the situation you're in, and know how confusing and daunting it must be to be thrust into this huge and amorphous and clever society. All the more reason for being determined to figure in it, and not be swamped by it. What you must remember is that all sensitive and creative people go through precisely the same agonies and uncertainties, but those who excel and distinguish themselves are those who refuse to be pushed aside and stand firm. You must know that Mother and I love you very much and want to give you all the help and support we can. But self-reliance and courage are things that no one else can supply. They have to come from within yourself. Just one other point. In having lived more than double the number of years you've lived, there's one truth I've learned, and that is that few problems in perspective, and especially in retrospect, are worth the laceration and misery that they seem to bring with them at the time. In other words, don't panic about life. Take it more in your stride. But do be sure that you're determining where the stride is taking you, and that it's you who are in control of it. And that very often means simply that you do make use of the advice and guidance available to you for the asking. Anyway, love, you'll be all right, I know, and these first weeks will suddenly stop seeming bewildering and alarming and settle into a manageable pattern, as long as you take the decision to be the manager of them. Mother reminds me that we didn't leave you with any bread, so enclosed is £3, which I hope will cope with immediate necessities. I was glad to hear that you're actually involved in the Dramatic Society, but again, don't just settle for crowd scenes if you see an opportunity of getting hold of something you can do as well as anyone else. It's a pity this is going to swallow up your weekends, so I do hope you can manipulate it to get home for a day or two in between. Lots of hugs and kisses and loving wishes. Your affectionate Pa.
University of East Anglia, 21st of October. Dear Papa, thank you for your letter and all your advice, and the money too. I've settled down quite a lot since I spoke to you. It was all so scary at first, and I was missing Derek, and it's so cold up here, and so different to going away on holiday. I mean, you can always come back early from holiday, but 3 years is a big commitment, and if I don't get through or give up, I'll feel terrible. I'm still not terribly happy with history, or rather the Whig interpretation of history, because that's what it seems confined to. But philosophy's quite fun, though I don't think I could ever take it entirely seriously. Are there any green gorillas in Africa? I don't really care. But it's only for 2 terms. History too, and then as long as I get through prelims I can concentrate more on literature. There is so much reading to be done, so many books to refer to. Meanwhile there's so much else to get involved with. The Poetry Society and the Students' Union and the university newspapers. There are 2. Well, one more of a weekly news sheet. I volunteered to work on both with a girl called Nadine that I met at a bus stop. Horsham is awful. It's not even a disused aerodrome. There are lightning jets taking off just opposite, and it's a bore getting to and from the campus. The last bus leaves at 11:30, but I met someone whose floor I can sleep on if I get stuck. Mind you, the campus is ridiculous. An icy wind sweeps across from Siberia, hitting Norwich first, and we have to struggle along bloody raised walkways. I think architects should be made to live in their own buildings. The residences are built like pyramids, with the entrance at the top. I mean, they're very pretty from a distance, but if you're drunk and it's 2 a.m. and you live on the bottom floor, you have to negotiate the steepest, most dangerous steps in the world. I'm surprised there aren't more accidents. And there's no place to hide behind the plate glass windows. People just stare in. And the whole place smells of rubber, so it's impossible to study there for more than 20 minutes without being sick. Apart from all that, it's a lovely building. I'm reading Howard's End. The significance of houses in Howard's End. I think they represent middle-class security and boundaries. I mean, the middle class protect themselves from the threat of the working classes by building walls around themselves. But I haven't really read it yet, so that's just an idea I had. I'll write again when I have a moment. Loads of love, M.
Fleece House, 29th of October. Dearest Mandel, I was so glad to have your letter and all the news of life in its new setting and pattern, and I'm delighted that your initial panic and fear seem to have subsided. You obviously have a formidable task on your hands, and I know only too well, as you know I know only too well, the drowning feeling one can get when confronted by such an ocean of books and reading and absorption and decanting of your own interpretations. The only way of tackling it, which again I don't follow too faithfully myself, although perhaps I do once I've ceased wallowing in despair, is to take it at a steady stride, a bit like a horse pulls a cart, just keeping your eyes on the road immediately ahead, and suddenly you find you've covered more mileage than you thought yourself capable of. And do remember, as I think I said in my last letter, that you are the one who must take the strides and work out your own pace and your own direction. I can see your point about the significance of houses in Howard's End. I dunno. It's so long since I read it, but vaguely I would have guessed that Forster was looking at the values and quality of life of that period, and that Howard's End in itself symbolized some of the structure and stability of the kind of class he was dealing with. Yes? Or is that just an imposed value judgment? Write when you can about what you're doing, your academic and non-academic activities, because I'm interested in all your doings. Must now press on with my own work. All love, as always, your affectionate Pa.
I was in my second term at the University of East Anglia to read English and American literature. After the initial panic and fear, I settled down and was beginning to enjoy university life.
Fleece House, 24th of January 1969. My dear Mandy, Fabian had 13 birthday cards, including ones from all the family except you. Furthermore, you've now been back at the university 3 weeks, and all your mother has heard from you has been an immediate phone call and a hastily scrawled note. Lack of time simply isn't an adequate excuse. A letter, birthday card, or telephone call cannot consume vital minutes of your week. I hope you are well, and that your life is proceeding satisfactorily. My love, as always, Pa.
In November 1968, my father was elected rector of Edinburgh University. He was inaugurated the following February. I wrote to him from Norwich. Dearest Papa, the inauguration celebrations were splendid, and you'll make a wonderful rector, especially if you have to wear those robes all the time, which might not be a bad idea if Edinburgh is always as cold as it was last week. Anyway, I'm very proud of you, and I know you'll take the job seriously, though it's going to be rather hectic dashing up and down to Scotland. Henry Williamson got very embarrassed, did I tell you? He went up to Prince Philip and made some crack about fighting at Ypres and asked him where he'd got all his medals before he realised who he was talking to, except that he must have known who he was. He saw Prince P crowning you or medalling you or whatever it was he did. In May 1969, my father took up a one-term research fellowship at Merton College, Oxford. Missing university was something he deeply regretted, and he placed a particularly high value on university education for us. Oxbridge had always symbolised to him the whole essence of intellectual brilliance and absolute social refinement. I think he always felt some disappointment in us for failing to be the intellectual success he had decided we should be. Perhaps his disappointment was lessened by the prospect of his term at Merton. Braffing, 24th of April. Dear Papa, just a note to wish you good luck. I hope everything goes well at Oxford. Merton must be more beautiful than UEA and conducive to creativity and great thoughts. Anyway, I do hope you enjoy your time at university. Try to get some writing done. Loads of love, M.
Merton College, Oxford, 27th of April. Dearest Mandel, it was a great joy to have your letter, and thank you so much for your good wishes and thoughts. I've now unpacked and am settling into what is a slightly unreal but highly pleasant pattern, and I think I shall probably stay here forever. My room looks out across Christchurch Meadows to pasture beyond, where cattle are grazing now in the rather damp, milky light, and the Thames beyond that. There's a French window leading out into the Fellows' garden, where limes are just coming into leaf. I have a large sitting room, white-panelled and a bit mildewed and shabby, but nice, and an adjoining bedroom. The record player is set up, and at the moment is playing Goossens with Bach. I brought with me several overdue commitments, including a 10,000-word appraisal of Harriet Beecher Stowe and Civil War literature for a new edition of Uncle Tom's Cabin. I hope I can turn with more leisure to other tasks, the main one being this tenuous idea of connecting 20th century totalitarianism with 19th century pastoral romanticism, the seeds of so much of the Nazi blood and soul philosophy, nature mysticism, etc. Every good wish for your own work, love. Do try to come over and see me. Merton College, 21st of May. Dearest Poodle, the idea of finding a haven for a few months was really illusory. Everyone sniffs you out, and the post with all its demands and pressures reaches out its long parchment hand and has you by the throat just as before. Your intense feelings about university bring to mind Auden's dictum or definition of education, which was something like a process to induce the greatest amount of stress without cracking.
In May, I was among a group of students filmed at the university for the final part of Kenneth Clarke's Civilization series.
Saw you on the telly. Civilization ends at East Anglia. Anyway, Kenneth Clarke seemed to think you were an attractive and promising lot, even if you haven't yet painted the Sistine Chapel. I'm just playing the new Dusty Springfield LP in Memphis. Terribly nice and souly. I'm very keen on Dusty. The sun is suddenly shining. I must try to sneak out with some books. It was lovely all being foregathered on Friday, and I'm glad I at last saw Hare.
I was 20 on the 23rd of May 1969. In June, my parents held a large party for me.
Merton College. My dear daughter, it was a great joy to be with you at the weekend, among friends who've known you since you were a babe. And you now look so pretty and blooming, and, which makes me happiest of all, so rounded as a person. I always felt that Scott Fitzgerald's injunction to his daughter could hardly be bettered. I want you to be among the best of your race, and not waste yourself on trivial aims. Be useful and proud. But now that you are 20 and such a fine young woman, I know that, unconsciously or not, that outlook is part of the person you are. I think, too, that this is largely true of all your generation. Detachedly, I envy you all. I think most of all for your friendships. My generation was fragmented. So many died or were shattered in the war, that the childhood and youth of those who came through are quite separate and remote. Well, dearest Mandy, I am sitting here in the gardens in magical sunlight and leafy greenery, conscious of the hours and days slipping by even faster and nearer to the time when I shall have to leave behind this stolen time. Rising sadness. It would be lovely to have you here for something like the climax. Just you and I will be the Alsops at the ball. It is Tuesday, June 24th. Please note, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. But we're invited to earlier drinks, so try to be here earlier. Can you arrive for lunch? We'll go punting if so. Always, all my love, your papa. P.S. Bring your big floppy hat and or boater jeans shades, etc. I'm told the ball transforms in the early hours from formal to outrageous. Long gown first, of course. You can use my room for sitting out and changing. Pa.
This happy state of affairs did not last. By the following October, my father and I were again not on speaking terms. The death of his father brought us together briefly in an uneasy truce. At the funeral, he handed me this letter.
Fleece House, 9th of October, 1969. This wasn't sent in all the disruptions, but belatedly here it is. My darling Poodle, as you already know, Grandpa is seriously ill. The further news last evening was that he had had to be operated upon, and his chances are now slight indeed. I wanted you to know that your message reached him and what comfort it brought him. He's been so intensely proud of you all, and you've given him great pleasure in your life. That I'm grateful for, but not in a formal sense, for I know that your concern arose naturally and spontaneously from the strong compassion and love that has always been so marked in you. You have inherited much of his fierce and affirmative spirit, the Allsop spirit, he called it. But you have unnecessary doubts about yourself and your adequacy to be loved. You should not have these misgivings about yourself. You are an exceptional person, and a person complete in your own right, and must not seek reassurance of a kind which is not of your own fastidious standards. You have no cause to doubt the love Mother and I have for you. In any case, it's a belief in your indomitable and singular talent which you must never compromise for others' approval, but follow your own star. Incidentally, it gave me great pleasure to know that you have now an accredited press card, that writing is becoming important to you. It isn't an easy following, but it is, I'm sure, your creative course. Don't be daunted by its demands. I love you very much. Papa.
Diary, 14th of November. Grandad died last Sunday. I'm going to miss him. He's always been a part of my life, and a really caring part, almost a father figure. We all went up to Leeds for the funeral, which was grim, especially when the curtains opened and the coffin slid into the furnace, or wherever it slides. I wasn't expecting that. It was a shock. Annie's in a terrible state, of course, and Daddy. But partly it's because he's had to deal with all the red tape and bureaucracy. Mum's been looking after Annie. Annie gave me her mother's engagement ring, which I will treasure forever. Not getting on with Dad. We spoke, of course, during the funeral and after, but we're not exactly best friends. Most of the time he's utterly vile to me. Doesn't speak except to accuse me of being selfish and self-centred. Total hypocrisy. He's the most egotistical person I have ever met in my life. Mum would like me to apologise, but I don't see what I have to apologise for. I haven't done anything. Gave a really bad class paper today. Fabian's coming up tomorrow to stay for a few days. My father and I had been on stormy terms for some time, a series of quarrels and semi-reconciliations. He strongly encouraged individuality, but did not always find it easy to accept an opinion different from his own. I spent a weekend at home shortly after going back to university at the beginning of October 1969. During that time we reached breaking point, quarrelled violently, and refused to speak or communicate for some weeks.
BBC, 24th of November. My dearest Mandy, Mother tells me that you have been talking with her on the telephone and that you are less than happy about the state of our relationship with each other. Well, darling, so am I, and I wish very deeply that it could be better. For certainly a year you seem to have been determined to disencumber yourself of all of us. Every child should, for the most healthy reasons, strike away from its parents and feel in charge of its own life. But absolute independence isn't an enjoyable or desirable state, for along with it go loneliness and solitariness. The precious thing about a family, I believe, is that without declaration of it, and even at a distance, a member can feel the love and support of the others, but, of course, this does carry with it the obligation of reciprocity. If you find it unendurably unpleasant with us, well, then you must stand completely on your own feet and say so and not seek any more support emotionally. I still hope that you don't find it so, and that you can see that there is a completely viable way of remaining a member of the family to the full, as an adult young woman. You must know this in your heart, if you look back, that you have unbounded love from us. This sort of love isn't contingent upon any other love you feel for other people. It exists at a different level, and will always be there, and need not monopolize your emotions. There's really no need to get rid of it to make room for the other. I don't really think there's all that impossible a blockage between us if it can be talked about. But perhaps you could simplify it by accepting all I've said as true, for I think that would clear up many of the divisions. I mean what I've said about my feelings for you as being true. I can't speak for yours, only hope that I'm right. Always your loving Pa.
Dear Pa, I was glad to get your letter. I've been wanting to write, but I am as uncompromising as you and find it as difficult to back down. I do know I have been behaving appallingly, reacting violently and cutting myself off, and I have been unhappy. I think it's a lot to do with adjusting to various situations at university, and, as so often happens when going through difficult periods, it's much easier to take it out on people you're close to and not explain the problem. Anyway, I hope I've changed, in general. I'm enjoying my work more, becoming, I think, more outward-looking, and I'm terribly aware of you and Ma. I'll be home in a couple of weeks so you can judge for yourself. I look forward very much to seeing you. With lots of real love, Mandy.
Fleece House, 29th of November, 1969. Darling Mandel, just got your letter upon returning from Edinburgh, and thank you for writing so warmly and responsively. It makes me very happy that we can talk so openly to each other still, because it shows that there's nothing fundamentally or permanently wrong between us. 24th of January, 1970. My dear Mandel, I've just been reading The Immediate Experience, an excellent collection of writings on the pop culture which I think you'd be very interested in. Do have a look at it. By Robert Warshaw, an American critic who died a few years ago at only 37. Lionel Trilling, in the introduction, describes how his friendship with Warshaw developed out of a shared reaction against the prevailing permissiveness. This brings me to the point at issue. I don't know whether or not you have encountered any sort of drugs. I do know that the opportunity for flirtation or deeper involvement with the drug scene arises easily in the university environment. I am banking my trust in your balance and good sense, and I hope that you reciprocally will realize that I have balance and good sense in my understanding and shared interest in the whole pop culture environment, of which drugs, like it or not, are undeniably a part. If you read that article I did on the subject in The Spectator, you will remember me saying that although I'm perfectly willing to consider that there may be levels of perception, etc., to which drugs give access, my mature decision for myself is that a good mind and a civilized and rational attitude to life and standards of behavior depend ultimately on clarity and discipline of thought. And by their very nature, drugs are the very antithesis of these. For all I know, the whole of this letter may be totally unnecessary, but read it over again before I next see you. I hope you'll understand it's written out of the greatest love for you. Your ever affectionate Pa.
Diary, 28th of January 1970. I got a letter from Daddy today warning me about drugs, which is very ironic, since I am a total failure as a hippie. I can't get high on pot however hard I try, and I'm much too frightened of acid. Anyway, I could not have accepted my father's earnest implorings or demands without the humour, which was as important a part of him. At home he enjoyed slapstick humour, large plastic spiders in the wash basin, as much as he enjoyed literary and word games. Whenever he went to the cinema and enjoyed the film, he adopted the personality of the main character and lived it with great, excessive vigour for some time. After a particular John Wayne Western, he bought himself a Stetson and a low-slung belt with holster and pistol, and drove the household to distraction with his exploding caps and low-pitched Texan voice for a week. He used to enjoy embarrassing me in front of my flatmates at university by flooding me with kitsch postcards. Often these contained information for help in my work. A sepia photograph of a pretty girl wheeling a barrow full of roses carried the message,
Do you know D.H. Lawrence's hexameter? Melville hunts the remote white whale of the deepest passional body. Also Aldous Huxley. Melville often defeated his own ends in Moby Dick by trying to be Elizabethan in the wrong way, taking the decorative scrollwork as the essential body of his own style.
My father took his duties as rector of Edinburgh University very seriously and spent a great deal of time travelling to and fro from Edinburgh.
Abercrombie, 26th of January 1970. Dearest Poodle, up in the far north again, at tail end of a sit-in drama about which one small elderly body of opinion seems to think I am the Bernadette Devlin figure, ripping up the cobblestones behind the barricades. You will, I think, be glad to hear that it seems we're within a hair of owning the mill. We shall have to move out of Braffing before Easter, in less than 3 weeks. Various prospective buyers tramp through the house. Mummy now has a line of sales patter like a snake oil huckster at a county fair, but it hasn't worked yet. Fleece House, 5th of March. Dearest Mandel, Mother and I got back last evening from Dorset, where we had 3 active days. We spent Monday and Tuesday seeing 3 separate lots of builders on the spot and combing through the ruin with them in fine detail. By the time the third one was at the beginning of his tour, the words suddenly choked in my craw. I couldn't repeat the litany again, and I despicably mumbled that I had to see Miss Watkins in the cottage. Wind-swept Watkins, whose house stinks like the bowels of hell with the impregnated saturation of piss of her wind-swept Salukis. I shoved the papers into Mother's hands and split. It was beautiful there. The weather was icy cold and brilliantly sunny. As I stood on the edge of the leat, trying once again vainly to unravel its untangled mysteries, a dipper flitted onto the hatches, bobbed around a bit, and flew off. Rather nice. For the uncommon and remarkable little bird, as you may know, actually walks on the riverbed to hunt for its food. Are you all right, love? I do hope that work is going satisfactorily, and that tensions with all life is reasonably happy. All love, Papa.
My parents moved into the mill over Easter 1970, amid the chaos of builders and decorators. I was in London working.
The Mill, West Milton, 19th of May 1970. Dearest Mandy, I stayed up all night last night, and now, at 2:30, my legs are buckling. It was an idiotic thing to do, really. After dinner, I returned to my study and carried on emptying packing cases and eventually crawled into bed at 6 a.m. Then I was awakened by men hammering at masonry and priming paint off my bedroom window. The countryside is incomparably beautiful. The wildflowers are surging along the hedge banks. Ragged robin, lords and ladies, bluebells, hankbits, blaze of colour. In our marshy meadow we've got a huge colony of March marigolds which almost burn with yellowness. The dippers are nesting under our bridge. Haven't found the nest, but when Fabe was here 2 days ago, I was taunted into going into the swimming pool. My limbs went blue with cold, and I felt as if I'd been pumped full of anaesthetic, but I did swim. We also threw Gally in. She hated it. And I went on crutches along the U-walk and saw the dipper flip out from under the bridge. Then its mate came whizzing along with a beak full of food. I scrambled down into the stream and waded about on crutches, but couldn't find the nest. But rather super, isn't it? Having dippers nesting in one's garden. Do let's see you again as soon as you can manage it. Always your loving Pa. P.S. 4 young dippers perched on the car tonight, just fledged.
While my parents were moving house, I had been considering applying for the post of editor of the university newspaper. The job would have coincided with my final year.
Darling Mandel, Mother tells me that you are considering reversing your decision and trying for the post of editor of the university newspaper. Now, I think you know that I have found your move towards journalism pleasing, so you will understand that I am moved only by objective considerations when I feel I must give my earlier advice on this a 3-line whip, which is that I do seriously believe you should regretfully refrain. I'm sure it would be self-deception to argue yourself into believing that you can do both, make of the paper the excellent production you would wish to make of it, and bring off a good pass. As you say, you can't live wholly in blinkers, but I do know from my own experience that a better way of stimulating one's concentration on academic or writing work is to make the contrasting activity, the diversion from it, a physical one. You have to feed your brain cells with blood and oxygen, and something like cross-country running, karate, hopscotch, yoga, or tiddlywinks even would be a better balance. When a Trinity Harty invaded Evelyn Waugh's room at Harvard to demand tipsily and belligerently what he did for the college, Waugh replied that he drank for it. But then Waugh only got a 4th. You'll be coming down soon, won't you? Have you thought about a summer job yet? Presumably you'll want to spend some time in London, as you'll probably work there, but it would be nice if you could take some time off and get down to the mill for a bit. Ever your affectionate Pa.
In October, I began my last year at university. I fluctuated for a while between anxiety and indifference over the final examinations and occasional worry about future employment.
Dearest Mandel, I'm sitting out on the balcony typing this in blissful unwavering sunshine as it has been since morning. Not now quite so hot, but with a rather wan warmth and an over-ripish light in which the apples glow like red fairy lights, and the hedges beyond the orchard are ablaze with haws and hips and have clusters of purple bruises which are blackthorn fruit. The knoll's got a faint haze over it, like butter muslin, and all the trees straggling up it are flecked with rust. A general air of decline and fall, but with an acrid smell of coming frosts in the sickly decay. We ran the leat through this morning to scour it of autumn leaves, and Triss has built a new waterfall system down the side of the bank, which began collapsing where the overflow pipe had eroded it with a constant trickle. The 5-barred gate has now been painted by Triss, and also most of the barn doors, and it all looks most bright and spick. Mother and I were a couple of days in Bristol. I had to be there on Wednesday to run through the commentary I've written for a film for the Natural History Unit there, so we stopped overnight and drove back yesterday morning. Triss has now heard that he has got to go through the formal procedure of applying for the Bristol job, so of course there's no telling whether he'll be taken on or not. It's bad time for getting into television. Contraction and cutback on all sides. Even with the BBC, the order is that the butter or margarine has to be spread thinner. I do hope he gets in, and soon, because I know he'll be a natural for a production job. We've had a letter from Fabe from Leeds and spoken to him once on the telephone, and although I think he's found it a bit daunting to start with, I'm sure he'll have settled in by now. I think, too, that he's managed to find some less squalid lodgings. The Italian embassy have now come up with the details of how he could have done his art course in Rome. Lovely to have your long, informative letters, love, and we're so glad that everything is meshing and going along at a nice clip. Have you definitely made up your mind that it is publishing you want to go in for, rather than journalism, say, or television, or the stage? I think it was a sensible idea to have the preliminary chat with the appointments man, although he doesn't sound to be especially stimulating. Why are they always such sad sacks? Next summer will be soon enough, I think, to start doing anything definite. If you have by then decided that publishing is what you want, well, get down on paper some specific places to head for. I don't think you will have any problem about getting in one of the best houses. The dogs are all right, I suppose, although Duffy and Gally have escaped twice. I think Triss has finally plugged up the duck-sized gaps. Very interesting to hear your reactions to Dyson. One of the oddities of life is that it's quite possible to like and respect the other side. Mother's well, and she's at the moment putting in plants and shrubs we bought yesterday. Take care of your dear self. Love and kisses, Papa.